Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 63 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah, we're just sorting through some technical difficulties. We ended up having to reset some passwords and whatnot. I forgot to update my tablet, and now we are trying to get the show sheet pulled up on my tablet so that I know what we're talking about today.
Yes, and I just did for you. So
awesome.
Up
Thank
right
you so much.
Yes, I can
all
be
right.
an engineer too.
We are all on the same page.
Finally.
So, hello there, all of you listening to us live on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. Thank you so much for being with us, and if you're listening to the podcast afterwards recording, thank you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for seeking us out.
Yeah, we hope you join us on Discord. We seriously do. Whether you do it live or not is not so much important, but so much that we'd like you to be part of the conversation. So
Absolutely. So we got we had a bit of a heavy conversation last week.
we did.
Going over the intricacies of the White Wolf World of Darkness setting and such like
We
that.
packed a lot into that discussion.
We actually went over time to kind of answer a lot of the really great questions and whatnot. We had a bit of a later conversation this week, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think I'm ready for it. And we still have questions, which is wonderful. So this week we're talking about endings.
Yeah.
Wrap-ups, closing things. And
because we talk a lot about starting campaigns.
Yeah.
And how to begin them and whatnot. But ending is kind of I wouldn't say it's a delicate thing. Like, it doesn't really necessarily take a lot of finesse, but there is a knack to it. There's some definite tips where you don't just after you finish up a combat, just go, okay, well that's it.
Exactly.
And walk away from the table. There's a few things you got to kind of take into consideration, and wrapping a story up with a neat little bow at the end to make it feel like a contained session, like a contained episode, or like at the end of a campaign, like a contained story, takes a little bit of work.
Yeah, and I think we have to kind of break down a few things here, at least for me, because when I first looked into this and I was talking with you about it as a show idea, I was originally thinking something more along the realm of just talking about how to wrap up a campaign, like how to find a good closing, how to make it worthwhile. And then I kind of stepped back from them, like, okay, well, not only how do you end a campaign, but like maybe it's a series, maybe it's just episodes, maybe you're doing one dungeon crawl after another, so there's not really a cohesive plot. Like, how do you know when it's over? And then worse yet, how do you end something that just needs to end?
Yeah.
Like, you get that feeling of, like, we need to move on to something, or, oh, there's this new game, or, hey, someone's got this idea to run a story. Like, I think in most cases, like, at least for me, I think I've been involved in 2 games that have actually closed.
Oh, yeah.
Like, legitimately came to a close.
Let's see here. I ended one of them. Actually got to, like, the end of the plot and wrapped it.
Right. See?
Yeah,
it's hard.
Like, I think I was there for, I was there for the end of a couple of your plots, but I don't think I was there for the beginning of them, so I can't even say that I went for, like, the entirety of the campaign.
Not to say they go, but it came to an end.
But yeah, I was there for, I think 2 of yours.
Right.
Your Children of Heroes game for the first chapter of it, at least.
Yep.
The second chapter is still ongoing.
Yep.
And the first chapter of your D&D game.
Yep. Yeah, so I chaptered mine for that reason and left them with a close, but also with the idea that there was more to come. And I don't think I did a great job of either of those closings because I'm the worst critic of myself, as most of us are. And looking further into this discussion topic, because I do it all the time. So, like, when just to give you guys a flavor, this isn't just us remembering our lives and bringing these things forward. I do a ridiculous amount of research in the form of, like, high compression. I'll pull notes together for months on little things, and then, like, 2 days before we actually sit down to do the show write-up, I'll compress all that into, like, 5 hours of hard learning to try and refresh myself on all those things. And I come out with a lot of stuff, but a lot of times I come back with, like, oh my lord, I've just scratched the surface.
Uh-huh.
And to this one, I kind of feel that way, but I also feel like there's a couple things to discuss.
Okay.
And I kind of laid out, I know my document when we started in one place and kind of drifted from there.
So our typical writing thing for the things, we pull up a Google Doc.
Yeah.
And so he'll be at his computer, I'll be at my computer, and we'll both be typing at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you've never used a Google Doc before, it's simultaneous.
Yeah.
Like, you can see each other's edits in real time, and so there's just two cursors both typing at the same time, and it's moving the text all around.
Frantic.
Sometimes it gets a little frantic. So.
And so we try and make sense of it, and then we figured out what we're going to do. But
we start leaving notes for each other.
Yeah, or like, we don't like this section, we'll move this to another show. Or what are you thinking here? And then there's usual conversations that follow that up. So I'm going to talk about some typical ends of episode of sessions. Let's just talk about ending a session to start with, something simple.
Sure.
Like, when you're going to have a sit down with your group, what are good things to do just to close up your session? And I think that's a real basic thing that a lot of people, like, we've talked about it a few times. We do our questions at the end of ours, but if we reel back just from that into the actual story,
right,
you have, do you end back at the pub? I mean, that's literally the story circle that brings you right back to where you started, wherever. Like, they met with the Duke, they go and discover the thing, they find out it's been lost, they find that thing, it's actually being held by the Duke's son, who's a turd ball, they have to take care of him, and now they're back with the Duke, with him in tow, to explain the whole situation. So, perfect story circle.
Yep.
Great kind of feel
you get
for
the
it.
job in a pub, you go do the job, you come back to commiserate about the job in the pub.
Again, the Shadowrun Johnson mentality is the same thing. You find the job, you find out how much you're going to get paid for the job, you do the job, you return to the Johnson, you get your pay, you're done. So that works really well. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes that has to happen over a series, and you're left with, like, a cliffhanger between, because maybe your sessions are only 4 hours, and this is probably going to take 8. Combat gets a little long, things like that. TV shows do this really well, about doing those and introducing their problems and coming to some level of resolution on them.
Yeah, I think this is probably the most common ending for something that has episodic play. Like a TV show, where typically you're going to have at the beginning of your session a problem is going to be posed or a job is going to be taken. Something that the characters need to solve. You're going to spend the entire time unraveling that and solving that, and then when you reach that conclusion of, okay, we solved the thing, that's when your ending happens.
Right.
It's not a cliffhanger. I mean, you can still have some lingering stuff.
Yeah.
I was always a big fan of the show Burn Notice.
I think that was great, yeah.
So they always had like kind of a meta plot going on where there was a bigger thing going on in the background that took an entire season to solve. And you would get little trickles of that plot throughout it, but each plot had its own major problem, its own mission, essentially.
Correct.
And you would get that mission at the beginning, you would solve that mission at the end, and even though there were still questions about the big plot, the big problem got, the problem right in front of them got solved.
Yes. And I will honestly say this, even at our level of experience with doing these as often as we have and running our stories and being in stories, that is a hard thing to achieve in a sit-down.
It sometimes is, yeah.
Sometimes it feels impossible. And I think the real kicker there is, as a storyteller, in your mind, you have a vision of how things are going to go and how you want them to end, and then the players show up.
Isn't that just the truth?
And we're not saying they do anything wrong, but they're literally a variable that you cannot count on in your story. So all you can do is lay out how things should kind of flow and set your contingencies, and then come to your closing. So kind of coming back to that, like, when you're talking about an episodic closing, you always want, and this is something that I was listening to from another group, and I thought it was brilliant, is you always want to make sure that you close your episodes. Now, granted, if you cliffhang, that's not great, because maybe it was necessary. They're in, they just finished a fight, and you really don't want to cram the end of it in all at one time. You're like, hey, let's do it, next week. We'll do our finish up. You want to end at the point where you can look at it and say, I have an idea of where those characters could be right now and what they could be doing.
Yeah.
That you could say you're comfortable with just leaving it there and walking away. And that's the joy of episodic. You may not have closed the super plot that's lingering in the background, but that day's conclusion has come to an end, and you know where those characters are and what their comfort levels and things like that.
Right. You didn't resolve everything, but at least you got a note of finality.
Exactly.
In there.
Exactly.
Something got accomplished. You had a climax and a resolution in the story sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of parallels that I could draw with this, but because we're on certain networks, I'm not going to do that. But I'm just going to say there's a certain sense of closure.
Yeah.
That comes with finishing something. And a good example that I thought I didn't consider that was very episodic in its feel and the way that it closed was Star Wars: A New Hope. It was
they blew up the Death Star, and
right.
Boom,
but
done.
And really there wasn't much to it. But at the end, there was an awards ceremony. They got recognition for their completion.
Yeah,
that's really what you need to complete a story. So if you've got a whole bunch of episodes that has been moving along, grab something within there that was important to the players, not necessarily you and things like that. Make the notes about the players and then come back. Maybe it's the orphanage gets finished getting built and the kids give them macaroni necklaces and, or someone shows up in a town remembering them and, pulls out the ancient pieces and gives them awards from those, or they're left with a state.
You're taking me back to my LARP days, man. There was we attended the same LARP, so when I was out there for a little while, I got a bug to run some plots with the permission of the people there. But what I wanted to do was run them for the new players on the field. Because everything was really like high level, high concept, unless you had been attending that LARP for 3 years, you did not have the power to even interact.
Yes, kind of felt like that.
So what I wanted to do was provide a little bit of plot, a little bit of gameplay for the people who, were like first to third level, This is a fantasy LARP, so typical, boffer weapons and swords and shields and magic and stuff like that. So I ran this plot where there was a little necromancer who was causing problem for this little village or something like that. And he raised some just real, crappy zombies and stuff like that out of the local graveyard and whatnot. And there was a little bit of intrigue with it. It wasn't just as simple as straightforward as go kill zombies, win award. But at the end of it, though, the mayor of this small village that I invented came to the town and presented everybody who took up those the quest to save the village with little medals that I had made. I had gone out to Joanne Fabrics and I got these little charms that were just little like an eagle or something like that, And I got a little strip of decorative ribbon and I made little pins that I could pin on them as awards of their valor for stepping up and helping these helpless villagers. And, for, a first-level character, who was new to all of this, that was a big damn deal. And, it was this crappy little trinket that I made with 50 cents worth of junk, but damn, if they weren't strutting around the entire rest of the weekend going, I got a medal pinned on my chest for killing zombies.
Yeah, it's that little extra effort that makes such a huge difference. And getting that recognition, that simple level of recognition that was more than just, you get 20 XP, 30 gold, and 2 potions.
Right. You find some treasure, okay, and we're done,
Yeah.
No, but it's... There's a note where they're like, okay, we're closing the book on this, but we want you to know that everything you did today was great, full of valor and heroics, and we are eternally grateful to you. Like my game, where you had an entire village, a fishing village that named a holiday after you.
They did.
The day that you guys saved.
It wasn't after me.
Well, it was they named it after the troll you killed.
Correct.
And they named it Crushfall.
Crushfall.
Exactly.
Well, again, I kind of instigated that, but...
Yeah, but,
It was worth it.
No, I had it written in my notes, though. So, you played into it. It was great. But, that put a note of finality on that. You knew once that victory party was being thrown in your guys' honor at the very end...
Yeah.
That plot had wrapped up. That was great.
No, it was perfect. So, and that's what I'm trying to say. If you're dealing with a closure, simply give some recognition. Find something that the players attach to within it. And again, it may not be the thing you think it is. So many times they'll attach to things in the weirdest way, whether it's the little girl who fell down the well and you thought was going to be killed by trolls down there, and it was her body that they were going to go out, use as a thing. And instead they actually save her, and now she's no longer a little orphan girl. She's going to college based upon the funds that they threw together. Maybe it's her. Maybe she comes back with a family.
And maybe not every game has like an external group of NPCs that will celebrate your victories for you.
Right.
But maybe just give your players a little bit of time to rest on their laurels and celebrate their own victory. Even if that just happens in a camp in the woods. But set that stage for them. Okay, you guys, you come out of the dungeon. Okay, we want to take a long rest. All right, cool. You take a long rest for the night at the mouth of the thing. You get your campfire built. The bard is strumming, a tune of victory on their lute. The barbarian breaks out the cask of good ale, and you all sit around and you commiserate and commemorate. Everybody, take a moment and tell a quick story of what happened inside as you remember your adventure here. Have your little party instigate that scene for them if need be. And that can be a great way to end the night because then everybody's feeling great about it.
Yeah. So transitioning that to something larger is where people start getting in trouble, because now you've got a large plot. You've got all this information, all these little pieces that they've completed and put together, and you got to get to the end of this and make it something that's memorable. You've got to bring together the aspects of something more like Return of the Jedi, or Lord of the Rings, where you've got this massive plot that's been rolling along, and these characters who've developed, and these bonds and enemies that they've made along the ways. How do you bring that together? And I looked at it as, you have to end these things on some kind of a high note. It doesn't necessarily have to be a proper note. It doesn't have to be like a high note in the sense that everything is great. Death happens, and you can definitely do that. But it also, there are some things that you can do, and one that I thought was great, and I had to go back to it and had to find it. If you haven't watched him, The Great GM, which is Guy Scalanders, he's a writer, has done a lot of great stuff, but he also has a YouTube channel. I highly recommend it. His videos are very short, traditionally, and his information is quite amazing. But he has the 5 C's to a great ending. And I think they do a good job of explaining the points that you need to pull together. One of the first ones, and I'm going to do these quickly. He does a great job. I highly recommend you watch the video. Is you have to make it cool. Do something different. A lot of times you'll see people set up different scenery, or they'll bring out something new. Or if you're doing minis, have a special mini or have a special landscape. But literally change the setting. If they've been tromping through the snow and deserts, have them fight in a mountainous cavern that has lava pits. Totally alter it. Get their mind in a different place. Make it feel epic. Make it cool. Make it different. Make it sound different. Make it feel different. The next one is chaos. Now, this is where things get it should feel like grand insanity. Now, you've probably up to this point given them puzzles and things like that on an individual basis. What we're talking about is taking it to the next level. So if you've got your necromancer who they've been fighting the whole time, and he's finally held himself up in the castle, there's nothing to say that he might not have made some abominations in there that they're not necessarily prepared for, but the moment that those giants show up at the corners and those are undead stone golem meat shield things. I don't know what that is.
Right, right.
Now it's larger than life and it's insane. Now instead of it just being that you've got a front door, maybe there's an army that's coming with the PCs as a diversion while they quietly sneak through the tunnels up under the thing. So you've got extremes. Everything needs to be at that level so that each moment becomes a mini adventure. Each scene within that becomes a mini adventure that keeps bringing this intensity. You need to have contingency. That's the third C, and that is for both the players and the villainy.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that you need to have contingency for anything they may do to end your prom, but if you always need to know if then what for the process. Always. If the rebels make it down to the Endor moon but get caught because they can't, their rolls sucked. Okay, so now they're caught, so the shield generator won't go down, which means the PCs who are flying around in space can't take out the Death Star.
Spoilers, by the way.
Yeah, bad things are going to happen, right? So instead, you have to have these contingencies to say, okay, well, they could break out and do something. So give them the options to succeed.
I failed my third death save. What does that mean? Well, now, Jedi, you will die.
So, but you need to keep giving them the options of success. And putting it out there, but it doesn't mean it has to be in the end successful. It just has to be contingent. Catastrophic is the fourth C, and that's the one that I think doesn't always get sold right, and that is where that the players feel the impendingness and the importantness of it. It needs to be, if we let this guy finish what he started in that castle, everyone on this continent will be undead by the morning.
Save the world plot, yeah.
Or if we don't get to the queen before Richelieu takes her, she will be in another country by tomorrow morning, and we will be without a leader and without a ruler, which means they could just walk in and conquer us.
Yep.
And every man, woman, and child who's defended this will be dead. Or we need to do this, and all of our men are with you to the end of the days. Those kind of things. Those are the moments that you want to bring to the end. And finally, the climax. It needs to be climactic. It shouldn't just be, and he said it perfectly. I won't say it the way he said it, but I will say this. You need to make sure that your contingencies are set up that the players don't just walk into the final boss and because of their epic weapons and the prep that they've done, that it's literally 3 rounds and over. Because they're going to feel that like it was a feather hitting them. They're going to go, was that it? Are we done now? Was that it? No. You need to have a contingency that says that if in 3 rounds the thing is over, great. Contingency 2 kicks in. What is contingency 2? His ring cracks against the floor. And suddenly a mist fills the room, and now it's full of undead.
Right.
And it pours out of his ring like gas for like a cloud that just keeps going. His contingency was if he died, this happens, regardless, kind of a thing. Oh crap! Now we have to fight through all these guys while this place falls apart. So always be prepared to make the climax climactic. It needs to be there. They need to feel that thunder. So when you're thinking about wrapping things, remember to grab the pieces that has happened and wrap it all together in those C's.
Yeah, I'll tell you about that last one, making the events, having your contingencies and stuff like that and building your big climactic encounter. That's advice I need to internalize a lot, because admittedly that's probably one of my biggest weak points, or at least it's a point I'm self-conscious the most about. I've in my game, I know I've had a couple situations where it has been 3 rounds and done, or one spell has trivialized the encounter for you guys. So yeah, definitely got to take some notes here on my own. So
yeah.
See, we're doing a podcast. So I got things to learn too, though.
I think every time we've done these podcasts, there's something new we've learned.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really not a time when we just sat down like, oh, I know what I'm doing here.
I feel like we've been pretty honest about that, though. About how this is a learning experience for us as well. Do you want to talk about cliffhangers?
Well, you kick us off.
All right. So, I kind of want to start by talking about what a cliffhanger is. Okay, so cliffhangers are most everybody knows what a cliffhanger is, but it's when you end before the climax of a story. Or I should say, at the climax of a story before the resolution. So, for instance, the big bad evil guy that you've been gearing up to go fight walks into the room, declares that he's going to kill all the heroes, and that's where we're going to wrap it up for the night.
Yeah.
we'll start with combat when we come back, or the big reveal happens, and the the masked villain reveals who is under the mask, and I'll tell you when we come back next week.
Yeah, like my last D&D episode for the game that I run, literally I ended with a phrase that surprised everyone in different ways. Like some people were like, "Oh, I felt this one coming on," and other people were like, "What? No, 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 no! That's not right. That's not right. That's not what it should be." So, and I have pretty much no intention to return to that scene, but to return to sometime after it.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that I left with a feeling. They finished, they wrapped, came to a close, and I said, okay, what can I leave them that is a change? That is a change of scenery. And so I literally just inserted a moment and basically threw at my group like, hey, here's a blast from the past. Do you remember this moment? And left it there. And it was a cliffhanger of sorts because it opens the door to the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a distinction between unresolved plot and cliffhanger. And I don't necessarily know that what you did was a cliffhanger. You gave us some plot that could not be immediately resolved, but at least we got the plot. You follow?
Yes. I see. The way I look at it is, I consider it a plot hook that doesn't get used.
Yeah.
Until the next piece.
Sure. We
we
jot it down in our notes, and then we follow up on it when we when we come back. But what I'm talking about is more like because that wasn't a climax of the story necessarily. No. It was a stinger, I think, is what they usually call it. Where they just drop a plot point on you, and you're like, oh wow, I didn't see that coming. A plot twist, maybe. But a cliffhanger's really more like if we had followed up on that plot, tracked down say maybe the person who did the awful thing to the person that I found, and this person turned around and said all right, fine, if it's going to come to this, then we end the game there.
Right.
Now we have to wait however long till your next game session to find out how that resolves, and we're all hanging on that cliff, not knowing if I fall or if I climb back up or what. Hence the name cliffhanger. Right. Cliffhangers have always been a bit of I don't want to say controversial. Controversial makes it sound a lot more than what it actually is. But one of our players actually brought a perspective, because I didn't think cliffhangers were a real big issue. I liked to use them all the time because they're a good dramatic technique. They build tension, they build excitement for your next game session and whatnot.
They do.
We have a player in our mutual groups that does not like cliffhangers.
Does not like to be continued. Does not like cliffhangers.
Bugs the hell out of them.
Yes, because I think, and I'm going to say this. I think, from my perspective, it would be because sometimes they don't get resolved.
Yeah.
And that just sucks.
It does suck.
Yeah, I mean, to anyone who has ever read a book series that doesn't end and you've waited for that last book, that's how it feels. Yeah.
Anybody who's a fan of the show Dead Like Me.
Oh, man.
That's how that feels.
Oh, that hurt.
I know.
That hurt in a spot.
I know, right?
Oof. Poor George.
Poor George. But anyway, so what I would say is, if you are going to pull the cliffhanger, just be darn sure you're going to resolve that cliffhanger.
You should have already planned for the next session.
Yes. Already have the RSVPs out for the next session.
We're going to be and so we're gaming next week on Saturday.
Right.
Like, that should be your next words out of your mouth while they're all standing agape at you like, oh boy.
And then we've also got, kind of closing your story up when things kind of die.
Yeah.
It's not really an ending to a story necessarily.
No.
It's not really a your proper wrapping your story up, but sometimes you've got campaigns where real life steps in. somebody gets a new job and their hours now conflict, or somebody gets married, has a baby, something like that, and
sickness, illness, any number of things.
Any number of things where your group may just not be there.
Yeah.
And
it stinks. As a storyteller, you get that same feeling as you don't have control.
Mm-hmm. There's also, I've had groups end just because of lack of interest.
Yeah, people leave town, people come to town. It happens.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes what the story you're telling just isn't interesting.
No, and it's moods. I can remember times when I would start into a story because I was in a specific mood and I had a drive behind it, and then as it lingered on and things got longer, I lost the mood. I lost the drive.
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this right now? And it stinks. It should never feel like a job, but all too often it does.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when things really start dying as a storyteller. But I think when the fun dries up as a player, or your vision moves to something new, sometimes it can really get boring as a player.
Yeah, sometimes it is the new hot and now too. And that's honestly that's what really kills me about doing this podcast, is that we do deep dives into other game systems and whatnot, and it's sparked interest in a handful of other systems to tell a handful of other stories, and I still have my D&D game on the back burner right now.
Yep.
And
I've got the same thing going on in my mind.
Still haven't put the energy into writing my next session.
And I know, and I'm trying to encourage you, and as a player and as a fellow storyteller, I'm encouraging you to keep going. I'm encouraging another writer to get his story going. And keep up the energy of writing, but it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
So what do you do then when things either fizzle out, or when it becomes apparent that the gaming group is no longer going to physically be able to continue as they were?
I would say, let's start with the basics, as we always do. As a GM, if you are not enjoying the game and you think it needs to end, communicate with your group.
Yeah.
You may be amazed how much they will turn around and say, we are having a great time, I really want to do this. And then you could look at them and say, okay, if that's the case, what do we need to wrap up? Like, what would be a good wrap up? And at that point, you can negotiate with them, like, let's do 3 more sessions. I'll write this and this and this, and we'll do those scenes, and we'll call it there. That's a good way as a storyteller to kind of get through that. On the other hand, they might be like, why? What do you want to do? Well, I've been looking at this other system, and I kind of got an idea for this thing. Okay, well, let's talk about it. And literally move from one to the next. There's nothing wrong with heart beating in that direction. If you're a player who are disinterested in your character, talk to your storyteller.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with one character leaving and another character coming in.
You and I had a conversation like that recently.
We did.
We were at a transition point in the story. And I was not... I had not been playing the character for very long in the story, so didn't have a lot of plot invested. And the plot that I did have invested was to go to a specific location. And then you changed the entire setting on us, so that location was kind of not there anymore, and kind of, it was a time shift is what it was.
It was a time shift.
280 years worth of time shift. So
a bit of the time flip.
The people who we were going to go see were no longer there. And the place we were journeying from was no longer there. And so we had to actually sit down and kind of talk about that, of like, actually, I'm not really even sure that my character would be invested in all of this.
Question. Did you really like that idea? Of switching characters.
I did.
Okay.
I did. I know that the conversation had a real I'm going to take one for the team feel to it. Because there were some out-of-character reasons why we were discussing doing that, mainly because we didn't feel like we had a healer. Our one cleric was essentially a battle cleric, and did not want to be relegated to the healer role. So I said, that's fine. My character, for in-game reasons, doesn't have a real reason to continue on in this. Her entire purpose for being with the group is gone.
Correct.
So why would she? She's
Exactly.
got a perfectly good out to just remain with this nomadic tribe, and I could bring in another character that fits the out-of-character role we need them to fit. I've got a backstory already written for them, and I would be excited about playing this character.
And I think as a storyteller, you giving that liberty to your players that at any time, if they feel like it's gone too far, that they can change characters. I see that as being a huge benefit. It takes a load off the off the players, and lets them go, okay,
Yeah.
I could try something different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be weird. There's all kinds of reasons why people come and go in stories.
Sure.
And there's no reason why you can't work up the bonds in between. Again, we tend to do serialized storytelling a lot more, where it's day to day, sometimes minute to minute. And we don't have to do that. We can definitely create larger gaps than that and say, okay, guys, next week we're going to pick up back at the Dukes. And they're, oh, wait, we're going to travel from the castle to the Dukes. Yeah. Can I do things in between then? Sure. We'll talk about that at the beginning of next session.
Write me an email. Hit me on
shoot
Discord,
me an email.
whatever.
So that way you can handle those kind of moments, because a player may come in between and be like, hey, can I switch characters? Sure. Maybe the Duke's going to present a new person. Maybe it's been a few weeks that you've been traveling with this other group because it was easier to go by caravan with them, and you kind of hit it off with this other guy. Maybe the other character is sick and is going to stay with the Duke.
Yeah.
Until they get better, and maybe they don't get better. There's all kinds of reasons.
Yeah. We had a player change very early on in my campaign.
We did.
We just kind of explained it as they took a bunch of damage in the last battle that they were present for. So we said, hey, that person is just recovering from their wounds. They decided maybe this whole adventuring thing wasn't for them. They stayed home next time, and the story continued. It was nice and easy. You ever TPK'd a group?
Once. They kind of did it to themselves.
So, for those of you who are not up on the lingo, TPK stands for Total Party Kill, aka you wipe the group. Everybody's dead. Nobody's left to res. Nobody's left to save them. What happened?
In my case, so in my case, I had a group of adventurers. It was early. I don't think they got past 3rd level. And they had been fighting goblins and other minor things. And they went in without prompting. They were like, we're going to go find this goblin group and take them out. And I'm like, okay. And so they did a bunch of investigation, talked to everybody in town, and it was pretty clear where they were coming from, these caves. I had planned that they were going to go into these caves and fight some goblins and get pushed back because there's a lot of them. And it just wasn't going to work out for them. One of the players thought he was Leroy Jenkins, and basically when they got near the front and saw a bunch of goblins, he rushed and got too far away from the group and got surrounded, and then made some really bad rolls.
Yep.
So now you've got one dead party member. Now, early on, one dead party member pretty much means re-roll. They were not having that.
So they were like, we got to run in and save him.
Correct. So they did that initially, lost a second person. So now there's 2 dead out of the 5. The other 3 bail back, and I basically just dragged the bodies in, because that's what they're going to do. And I really didn't even drag them in that far. I had the goblins dragging them in because they didn't want to have the wolves come and get them and cause a problem. The party decided that night they were going to go in and get the bodies of their comrades and get out of there. So they went in and literally did the dumbest thing ever. They get in, they're like, okay, we can see your guys. There's just a couple goblins who are in the area nearby, and they're like, okay, we're going to stealth over to them. And they stealthed over, and then one of the 3 players decided that he was going to make a ruckus and draw attention, and there was no good reason for it. And I'm like, okay, so you make a ruckus over this area, and now the goblins are looking. They're searching. So you guys are going to have to make stealth checks. And they all failed their stealth checks, and combat started. And they just wiped right there in the mouth of the cave. To, not much. Literally a handful of goblins. They got wiped out. And they were all okay with it, which was good. because they all felt like they fought valiantly. But at the same time, as soon as that, like, we ended, I'm like, okay, guys, we'll talk about, new characters and stuff. And they were all like, what? Like, you guys all died. They're like, yeah. Okay, so you tell me how you got out of this dead. And they're like, well, his cleric, like, his god would have done something.
No,
he's like a third level cleric.
Yeah.
Like, his god doesn't know him from grass.
He has first level spells, buddy.
Yeah, and they were just
one second level spell.
So two of them were upset that they died, and there was no like super god way to heal them. And then the other three were just prepared to like make new characters, and that's what broke up the group.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They got angry at each other.
Oh.
Because two believed that they were heroes, and I was screwing them after they ran in and did all their shenanigans.
Ah, jeez.
So it soured the whole thing.
So I TPK'd a group once.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. It was actually the climactic battle of the only campaign I've ever finished.
That's fantastic.
It was great. The party was trying to take an artifact into the abyss. There was this gigantic demon that was basically a black hole. Imagine a Sarlacc pit with no bottom to it.
Well, that's pretty cool.
And the way that they were going to destroy this artifact, because they couldn't find any other way to do it, was to throw it into the mouth of this particular demon.
That's one way to do it.
There was an old adventurer who was trying to do that already, who essentially put them on that path. They said, I can't complete this journey, but you guys are young and spry. Can you do it? So they did. They went in there. I had this, like, ruined temple in the bottom of the abyss that was essentially the guardian of this gigantic, all-consuming demon, the World Eater, sort of thing. And there was if you're familiar with the Merilith demon, which was just a few challenge ratings too high for them. It's that, like, snake-bodied, six-armed, sword-wielding sort of demon.
Oh, yeah.
So one of those things basically comes out and says, nobody sets foot in the Temple of the Master, unless they are purified first. And they had this big boss battle with this thing. And the entire party had little, like, tattoos on them that gave them a sense of the direction and general well-being of everybody else in the party. And one person grabbed the artifact and essentially did some parkour and made it past the demon and into the final chamber. The demon decided to stay back and cut up all of her buddies.
Oh.
And we had some really heroic deaths. As one by one, this person in the chamber of this world-eating demon felt the life forces of her party wink out through her tattoo until she knew that basically she was alone. So they wiped in that main hall, but then she decided she was going to essentially just clutch the artifact to her chest and jump in.
Oh, wow.
Because she knew she wasn't making it out.
Right.
And she wanted to make sure that it made it in.
Right. Right.
So, yep. Sacrificed herself heroically as the last person of the party.
Nice.
Everybody's dead. There's no re-rolling, but mission accomplished. And got rounds of, honestly, like, cheers and high fives all around. It was honestly the best case scenario for total wiping a party for a TPK.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was beautiful. I
Yeah.
think it's a great way to handle it.
So, I think there's good ways to handle that sort of thing. I think there's bad ways to handle that sort of thing. Obviously, as players, like, it happens, Maybe relax a little bit. Like, your DM does not owe you the, ability to just magically restart the game. That's kind of disappointing about how your story ended. I apologize for that.
Oh, no. It's and for me, it was a great learning experience on a couple levels, but it taught me that I should be cheering on my players a bit more. And that things happen.
Yeah.
Players do silly things. And some groups aren't the groups that you want to run games for.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they're not meant for you. I mean, it's all relationships are different when it comes to storytelling, and you will find someone running the game style that you like. It'll just take time.
Oh, yeah.
Especially
sure.
with the digital age. So,
all
right.
Do you ever run epilogues?
I've done it a few times. I did it with, I think, all the 7th Sea games I've done.
Because I know we talked a lot about closure. Closure in stories and providing those, wrapping up your plot points and stuff like that. And providing a note of finality, maybe even for providing that note of victory.
Yes.
at the end and such like that. I think an epilogue is a great way to do that.
I think it's an amazing way to do it. I think the trouble that you run into with epilogues is when you act for the players in their characters.
That's true.
When you're explaining what happens to them and what they do.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to say, like, this noble and lived out his days in luxury of his lands, and the fighter, went on to recognition. But it's another thing to say he built himself a tavern where he could tell his tales. Now, maybe after 4 years of playing with that player and that character, that's pretty much where he's going to end up. But at the same time, you're kind of doing an injustice to that player and letting him finish out and have the story at the end.
I think you can kind of do it both ways, though. Like, I think you can have an interactive epilogue. You don't need any dice rolls. You don't need any, like, firm role play or anything like that. But I think you can definitely wrap it up where you're like, okay, so, Rob, Theodane has gone through all these different things. You finally defeated the big bad evil guy. Where do you see Theodane ending up after this? And then give you the opportunity to say, well, I think, honestly, he'd go back to High Rock.
Yeah.
As an old war hero, he'd probably go back to see his old friends, etc., etc. He'd take this artifact back to this person. Okay, great. And you've told your story. There's no me, bouncing things off of you. There's no roles. There's no difficulty. It's just, you know what? Tell me how your story ends. Where does your character go? What do they do? I think that's good. That gives you a little bit of agency too. And then rolling that into a future campaign.
Yeah. I mean, and that comes up with some of the ending. Like, before you get to the very end, if you know you are getting there, have NPCs ask personal questions. Like, get to that point where you've got the fighter in the bar, and maybe he's waiting for something,
Sharing and you're just an ale with him and going, so where do
what
when all this is wrapped up, when all this horribleness is behind us? What's your plans?
Yeah, now you can do that. Now you've given agency to that. Yeah. And that's where you can push some of those questions with your players and make it very personal. That question wasn't just some weird question from some weird NPC. It was you gathering intel that you can then use later, because that's when they're going to give you the, oh, you care look.
Yeah.
And
you know what? Honestly, too, like, scenes like that I think are great. Because not only do you get that out of them, where you can learn kind of a little bit of the insight of your characters and what direction they feel like they're going, but you also give them another NPC that they've commiserated with.
Yes.
And now because that NPC is going to give their answer too. You know what I've always wanted to do?
Yep.
I've always wanted to start a corn farm. A corn farm? Oh, yeah. My father actually used to grow it, and I grew up, and blah, blah, blah. Give them all these wistful, nostalgic reasons why they want a corn farm, right?
Yeah.
And then, in the final battle, when that NPC dies or something like that, then they're like, no! And he was gonna start a corn farm! I go into a rage and unleash 3 reckless attacks on him!
Have a point of inspiration.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where you can pull those kind of things. I've always wanted to live in Montana.
Right. No, that's
exactly
that style scene. I think I will need 2 wives.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure you can have as many as you want.
I'm thinking, America, you could make that happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's the thing is that those kind of scenes help and bond things. But there's also those moments where, like, they're on an endless journey, and maybe they're not with somebody that they gave 2 shits about. This is the one captain who would take him across the sea, and instead he's just like, the sea, I love it dearly, but the fields of gold and wheat is what really... And then he's like, what? Why are
you on
And then he comes over, puts his arm around, the guy is just like, could you imagine it? Just a sea of gold, And, like, now you've started a scene that opens that door and starts putting those questions, and it starts a level of camaraderie with that character or that NPC, and can add a lot of flavor, but it gives you intel, and I think intel is one of the best things you can get.
Absolutely.
So,
you want to answer some questions?
Well, before we do that, I'm going to say one other thing. When we end scenes, or when we end episodes,
good point.
I always do questions.
Yes.
And I think it's important. I think the more specific your questions are, the better the answer you're going to get. So if you ask, did you enjoy yourself? You're going to get, yeah, it was fun. But if you say, what scene did you really enjoy the most? Like,
What
was
was
it
your
combat?
favorite
Was it
thing that happened
Like, give me
tonight?
one thing, just one. Because players will say their one thing and then go on to three others.
Yes,
And
always.
then someone else is going to jump on one of those three others, and then but you're going to find what they were interested in, and that's important. Finding out what you did wrong,
Yeah.
asking what was bad.
What could I have done better tonight? What would have
Exactly.
made this a better game for you?
Those kinds of questions are important as a storyteller.
And it's important that you take that feedback and that you internalize it and you understand that it is
You chew it.
that you chew it, that it is constructive in nature. You want that feedback. So if a person tells you, this game ended on a cliffhanger, and I really don't like cliffhangers. They make me literally anxious for the next game, and I don't like feeling anxious between games, you can say, okay, now I know how I need to run my next plot to not make this person's life a living hell for the next week.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And you can do that better. If they say that, I felt like this pacing was a little bit rushed, you can look at how you wrote your notes, how you wrote a scene, how you narrated that scene, and what maybe you could do to add some more detail, flush that scene out a little bit next time so that it isn't rushed. These are players giving you the cheat codes on how to make your game better. And you should really listen to them.
Always listen. Communication is key. We're going to keep saying that. That's literally going to be our tagline.
Absolutely.
Storyteller Conclave, communication is key. All right, now we'll do questions.
Now we do questions.
We got a little less than 10 minutes. If
Yeah,
we
we
want to
got-
pause, we can go longer.
We
Who
got about
cares?
10 minutes, yeah.
All right. So Knox asks, what about the story's end for specific players who just drop out for whatever reason, but continue for the rest of players? I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you just move on without addressing it? Do you leave the door open for them to return? What have you found the best practice? I've always done it the way TV shows do it. If it's in the middle of an action, they've disappeared for a specific reason, and they're just disappeared. Give them the agency to come back.
Mm-hmm.
It's the character going over the edge of the cliff, and then they're like, dude, you went over the edge of the cliff. Airbags. It was on fire. Sprinkler system. There's plans. There are contingencies. You can always come up with something. So leave the door open.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I say there are players who shouldn't be in games because they shouldn't be in your game because you butt heads.
Mm-hmm.
You never know when that player's going to say, can I come back? I see what I was doing wrong, or I'd like to talk to you more about it. Give them the opportunity. Have some growth for both of you.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say leave the door open.
Yeah, I definitely think leave the door open. I like using just very mundane, non-violent means of just explaining that character's absence. Hey guys, the wounds I took in last battle were just a little bit too tough for me. I'm going to take some time off to just fully recover.
Yeah.
And maybe I won't be with the group next time. Maybe I'll find something a little less stressful.
There you go.
Maybe I've decided to just indulge myself in one of my other passions. That corn farm I was talking about? Well, I got a bit of a windfall, and I'm going to go start it. See how it goes. Or something like that. I'm just going to go research a problem. Turn them into an NPC. Hey guys, I know we're all deep into this plot, researching this arcane artifact, and this, tied to a forgotten god and stuff like that.
Sure.
I'm going to go spend some time in the library and then use them as a plot hook next time. They return to you and say, hey, I found this research. Here's plot point A, B, and C. Boom. And good luck finding that.
Indeed.
You can always do that. But yeah, leave the door for them to come back, I think.
So grab another one.
So the second question that Knox asks, actually, it seems that sometimes loose ends from a main story can make good one-shots for groups wanting to revisit the old campaign. What are some ways to refresh quests that might have become stale if a time skip or epilogue was involved? That's an excellent question.
Okay, so I haven't had this, but I was witness to one of these, and that was where someone had a whole quest line that basically just dropped off at the relative beginning of their campaign.
Okay.
And the players at the end were like, "We want to go back and deal with that." Mm-hmm. And this was years later. This is after they did other games. They're like, "Whatever happened to this?" And then they got interested in it, and they all started talking about it. And finally, the stories are like, "Wait a second, you guys are interested in that?" Yeah. Can you run that? Just that part. Like when? And that became the question because the players are like, is it something we did and just don't remember? Or is it something that happened after the campaign ended and we went back?
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they did it with at the end. So they took
Okay.
their advanced players and came back to it, and the world was different. The place was different. It had taken them time. And he played it off as they all met at a tavern near it. After all their other adventures, they came there. So they all had stories of things that they had done.
Sure.
And then they were now going to go take care of this last thing.
Oh, that's great. It's
like
great.
a return. And he gave them all, like, they were older, so they all had deficiencies in some way. You know, because they were years on, right? They were in their elder time, but one of them had written letters to all of them. And when they all got to the pub, they're all like, all right, well, you know, I'm so glad you wrote me that letter. I didn't write you that letter. You wrote me. Who wrote these?
Dun, dun, dun.
And the plot pull was, it was one of the kids that had started the plot, was now an adult working at the bar, and they found them and wrote all the letters, but it took forever.
Gotcha.
So, and I thought that was really cool.
The game that I described the TPK from was actually the game that was was very much like this. It was actually a sequel to a previous campaign that a friend of mine at the time had run. And so, a lot, like, his plot was the big end of the world plot. My plot took place after. It was exactly that. It was picking up where the big end of the world plot left off when we saved the world.
There you go.
And so a lot of it was, a lot of my techniques had to do with environmental storytelling, because many of these players were present for that first plot. But there was a lot of effects of the big Save the World plot that were kind of left over, and so there was a lot of, like, little environmental things that I could tell of, you know, this location when you walk in, it looks battle-torn, there's this going on, that going on, and the players who were there for the first game were sitting there going like, oh, I know why this is all ripped up, and, you know, but again, there's also all that plot kind of left behind, so you can give that in some narration.
Yep.
Because this is all history that these players have lived through, even if they didn't participate in it. I mean, you know, this gigantic war happened. So, you know, maybe you were just a farmer at the time before you were chosen by the gods to come do this. But here you are, you know. Tell it from their perspective. Just say, okay, well, you remember that time when the goblin armies marched on, you know, this nation? Well, here you are. And now you've suddenly got all this extra history you can add in there. So I don't think it's too terribly difficult to do.
No. And like and sometimes I do jumps sometimes in the sense that when something ends, I might use parts of it for something else. Like in my 7th games, I literally had you guys coming into a harbor that was a scene from a previous game.
Right.
So you guys witnessed events that you were like, I know what's going on over there. So sometimes that's fun when you can run parallel to a previous game.
Yeah.
And you can have moments like that where you're like, wait a second, there's a group of adventurers that are blowing up a tower and I know those guys.
Guys.
But of course they don't.
Yeah.
So, okay, Technolich asks, endings? What about when your story takes place entirely after something significant? I'm thinking post-cataclysm or something equivalent. Do you think there are elements in that style of play that differ from the tension of looking forward at the inevitable end?
I think the best thing I can say here is a quote from the band Semisonic. Closing time. Every new beginning is some other beginning's end.
Correct.
So the post-cataclysm is just the beginning of the post-cataclysm world. And there's always something else that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you're not really looking forward to the inevitable end if you're playing post-cataclysm. You're just looking forward to the inevitable end of whatever the post-cataclysm world looks like. And you can go from there, you know. There's always a bigger fish. There's always some villain who's trying to end the world or blow up some undetonated nukes or something like that, you know? The Fallout series of games actually did a pretty good job of that. I mean, they begin with the apocalypse. And we're all dealing with the world afterwards. You know, that didn't end the story. That began the story.
Correct.
That just made the setting.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is that when you're talking about using an end, you're talking about a world setting, not a plot, not an episode, not anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting a setting and a feel. And I think that's really what you're pointing out there, is that there is attention to an inevitable end, but that inevitable end is the overarching plot, perhaps for the players, but maybe not.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to say that you couldn't run a game that talks about a cataclysmic end, and your players are literally the guards working at the castle, not even the top echelon guards. Like, they're the low people on the totem pole. And so literally they're just trying to survive the attack that's happening on the castle.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Like, they're not doing anything special, and nor did you give them any special orders. Like, this is it. It's just survival.
Mm-hmm.
And the game is all about survival and getting through things and discovering things and moving on from there. At that point, like, yeah, the inevitability is that castle is going to get taken. It is clear that the armies that are on the outside are way stronger than the armies on the inside, and now you're trying to figure your way out of that situation, but you're not going to do anything to stop it.
Third shift night crew ain't changing that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That's, I think, the one thing that you can do to try and alter that whole perception is shake it up. Do something different like that. Start with a weird failure, but don't make it your plot. Make it the setting that wraps around it.
Yep, I think it's great. So the Mad Elf asks, how do you use the ending of a game as the launch point for a new one? We kind of touched on that one a little bit.
I've done it a few times.
I mean, the thing is that the previous game just becomes the world building for the new one, is all it comes down to. Is that everything that happened is now canon story. Mm-hmm. And you have the advantage of not having to convey that to the players if you've got the same players in your group. You know, they know what happened. Now, you may have to do some things like explaining it to them from their new character's perspective. Your new characters obviously weren't there, so they may only know rumor, conjecture, ancient legend. You know, if you're playing a modern game, maybe just what they can look up on Wikipedia about what happened previously. But it really just kind of becomes world building for you. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think the best thing you can do is if you are writing a sequel plot is take some time to think about how the ending of your first game happened, what plot threads might have gone unresolved, what consequences might have happened, repercussions for the resolution of the first plot, and what new opportunities and plot threads might that open for the future.
Yeah.
You know, just because you defeated the big bad evil guy, does that mean that maybe the ancient powerful artifact he was using to become the big bad evil guy is maybe still out there? Could someone else have found it? Mm-hmm. Were there socioeconomic repercussions for this big bad evil guy doing the big bad evil thing?
Vacuums are terrible.
Did he conquer a nation? Did he kill an important figure? Yeah, nature abhors a vacuum, and so does politics.
It's sad, but it's true. Like, one of the things, one of the ways I've ended part of one of my campaigns, at least at one point, was that the king had to leave, and that made one of the players technically the king. And they had to figure out how they were going to handle that situation moving forward. It was a closed loop at that point of like, okay, well, here's where we're at. Shit. You know? And it altered the course of things going forward for that story. Because it created a vacuum that had to be filled.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
So now anytime you have something like that, think about the things that the characters care about. So maybe there's a town, maybe it's an area, maybe it's a old temple, maybe it's, you know, a halfway house, maybe it could be anything. What would happen to that in the absence of all of the stuff that was going on? Mm-hmm. And that's a perfect interlude into what's next.
Yep, absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be the same characters. It could be people who follow them up, you know. So
All right. Well, I think it's a good place to wrap up for the night. Next week's topic is going to be the one-player game. We're going to talk about either running it for just one player at a time, or having your plot surrounding one player, where the rest of the party is more your supporting role, where the plot revolves around just that single character. You can find us up on Twitter at @ST_Conclave. You can find us on Instagram also, @ST_Conclave. You can listen to us live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And go ahead and join the Discord. We would love to have some new discussion up there, some new questions. And you can even join us in the live chat if you're for one of our Patreons. You can find that up at storyteller-conclave.blueberry.net.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially Knox the Box, Sam, and the Arcane Asylum. Thank you ever so much for supporting us at the levels you do. But we love all of our patrons and everyone who takes care of us. It keeps this thing going. We will be forever in your debt because it makes this so much easier every time we do it. Our intro music is Beyond the Warrior by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. Our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/tracks.
I want to give a big shout out to our families as always. Vicky and Sean, thank you for supporting us through all this. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over the years, and you, every single one of our listeners, we love you. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Good night.
Night.